Well, good evening and hello, everybody. This is Joshua Service. I am the host of what I'm affectionately calling Talks with Josh and Friends. And it being a Wednesday, we've made it through most of the week, if that feels the same to anybody. But as I look past us and in front of us, I can't help but feel excited for today's conversation, but also just the energy that's in the world right now. Here locally in Washington, we've not seen a sunny, consistent string of days in some time. And when you think about, everything going on in the world, it's really nice to find those shiny moments in the day. Well, in thinking of shiny moments, I'd like to take the opportunity now to introduce our esteemed guest and my dear friend, Tawny Sanabria. Giving you a little context of my relationship with her. I've been working with Tawny as a coach and as a counselor for a couple years. And without her in my life, I don't know that I would be at the level at which I'm currently operating, because in all of our work and everything she does, she's just a real connector and someone who has been a massive impact in my life. And I hope that through today's conversation, you guys out there might pick up some positive things that you can incorporate into your life from our conversation. With that said, giving Tawny a little bit of a background story on her. Tawny Sanabria is currently licensed. She's got so many different skills and abilities. And if I miss anything, Tawny, please do chime in. Okay, but Tawny is not only a licensed marriage and family therapist, but she's also a certified human growth potential coach and a psychological fitness specialist. One of the things I truly love and adore about Tawny personally is that I can tell and know from personal experience that her greatest passion is for supporting individuals and couples to find their way to mindfully attune and connect with themselves and with others, allowing them for engagement in a truly organic and authentic way. Tawny, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. The sun is really helping things in these past couple weeks. Loving it so much.
Yes, I'm right there with you. I've found a new love for nature as we've been working through this. And it's something that had always been in me, but it's been, without being able to go to the gym, which is one of my staples of mental and physical soundness, nature has become my new true passion, one of them.
And that is so fantastic. I mean, that's the gift of this period of time for us. That's one of the gifts of this period of time for us, right? Is that I've got clients too that are out there exploring nature in ways that they never allowed themselves to before, because there was always something else that would take up their time. We've got a lot, there's not as many things that we can sort of distract ourselves with, right?
Or maybe there are new things that need to be discovered.
Exactly. So that opens up the space for those new things to be discovered, right?
Yeah.
And things like nature. I mean, there's a whole school of thought around nature therapy in and of itself, right? So that we're getting out and about in some ways, even if it's not sort of exploring the mountains and sort of really getting out there into the depths of it. Just that we're getting outside and finding some connection with the grass, for example, is so important for us.
If you saw it all, my last episode, I had Dr. Erica Wood on here, and she specifically spoke to that in reference to proven science of the study of what's called Japanese forest bathing, which is the art of putting yourself in nature for 15 minutes a day, allowing your body and central nervous system to recalculate, reconfigure. And if consistent, it's proven to be one of those things that is very powerful for people.
Yep. And what I love so much about that is, in its essence, it's really about connection.
Oh, go deeper with that. Let's talk about connection.
So that connection piece of, for that particular thing that you were just talking, that's connection to the earth, right? There's an energetic system that the earth is a part of, right? That we are a part of. And so connecting to the earth in ways like that is not that different, similar, than connecting to each other.
Yeah. It does take a bit of grounding. If you think about being in nature, you're grounding yourself in earth by being present there, the stillness that comes with it, focusing on calming breaths. And then when you incorporate that same philosophy into managing our relationships, those same principles can transfer over and be highly successful in your relationship life, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the other part that I'd add to that is we're talking about nature. I know that wasn't something necessarily that we brought in, that we were prepared for, but you know, the things that happen in nature that are sort of like, there's tragedy and chaos and
Yeah.
you know, loss of control. There's all of those things that happen in nature, just like what happens for us as human beings.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, can I switch gears really quick? I've got two quick questions for you. The first one is to dig a little bit deeper into your human growth potential specialist certification. I love what the work you do, but for those that maybe don't understand it, can you just give us some Betty basics on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at human potential from the perspective that I come at it from a human potential perspective, I guess, is that we've got three areas of wisdom that we connect with and engage with life from. So we've got our felt sense and our intuition. We've got our heart center, and we've got our thinking space in the brain, right? And so the thing that happens for most of us is that we spend, I don't know, 80-90%, somewhere in there, maybe even more, of the time of our life in our head thinking about our life.
Oh yeah, guilty right here.
We're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about the what ifs, we're trying to figure out like if we do this, that, or the other, then that will happen. And we are basically engaging with life in a way that is taking us out of life.
Interesting. I like the way you put that. To me, that's saying a lack of presence in ourselves and the connections we're creating. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to nature for a second, if we're sitting in nature, you talked about stillness and you talked about just that sense of like connection. We're not thinking about the leaves.
Yeah, that's true.
We're in there.
Yeah.
We're noticing. We're being with. We're not making a problem out of that tree that we're looking at, right?
I like that.
In our lives, that's what we do. We're making a problem out of something. We're thinking about this, we're thinking about that. We're trying to what if, and that takes us out of a connection from heart center or an intuitive place.
I'm chuckling internally because I'm just thinking about the many times in my life, and I think there's a lot of people out there that will relate to this, where we build up this massive story in our head and we're ready to burn the whole house down. And then when we find out what really is going on, we can at times feel foolish for the fake stories that we just fill ourselves with that have so many unnecessary side effects, right?
Yes. Because you think about, we're all struggling right now with loss of control and uncertainty. We're trying to what if our whole life. What if this happens? What if that happens? We're trying to prepare for everything that might occur, or we're trying to control a particular aspect of our life that we really essentially don't have control over. Okay, if I just find out more information, then I'll know this. Okay, well, okay, so that doesn't necessarily bring us into our experience of what it is that's happening for us right now. And so dealing with loss of control and uncertainty, if we get locked in our head, we actually will end up spinning ourselves up oftentimes.
Yeah.
And that creates more anxiety, more exhaustion, more depression, more disconnection. We don't connect with our partner from our head. We connect with our partner, for example, from our heart.
Which is not always a bad thing, but it needs to be balanced, right?
Absolutely. So if we think about these three areas that I talked about of engaging with life and experiencing life, if we're using 85%, 90% of the time from our head, we're missing out on what we could experience from heart and intuitive space in our body, right? Ideally, if we could have all three of those areas sort of working together and knowing their jobs, right? Because our thinking space takes over. That's not our job. That's not the thinking space's job. The thinking space's job is to, okay, we actually have to analyze something. Well, let's analyze it. We actually have to solve a problem. Let's solve a problem. Our thinking space's job is not to experience our whole life from our thinking space.
Yeah, and I think I'm just thinking back to the many different occupations that are out there that require so much headspace. So anytime you go to the gym, as an analogy, you go to the gym and you only work on your biceps or your pecs, well, you're going to have a really nicely developed upper body, but you're going to have chicken legs. And it's
Yes.
comparable to the idea of just using your thinking brain or just using your emotional brain. What was the third one again? Because we've talked about the heart and the mind.
Yeah, so we think about this as being sort of like in the belly, sort of our
Okay.
felt sense, our intuition. We definitely, in a state of fear, for example, we definitely can feel that because it's a more intense level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, oh gosh, this doesn't feel right. We've all been able to connect with something like that. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of it. The thinking space goes, oh, no, 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 right? Like, and that becomes, but 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 also we don't necessarily connect with that space at a lower level, which
Yeah.
really is the perfect place to create presence from a moment to moment uh, engagement process.
So it goes back to nature. You're rooted in the base and your intuition, and then your experience travels through your heart and your mind, and then the story is created between those three. Is that correct? Or most?
Yeah, ideally that would be fantastic. So a lot of things that I work with my clients around is really trying to get into the body. In my meditation classes, it really is about not trying to go somewhere, not trying to transcend or not trying to avoid or get from someplace to the other. It really is about like what is going on, connecting with what our experience is in this moment, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, letting ourselves be in it in a way that allows us to experience presence and gather that wisdom that might be there at heart center or in that intuitive space in our body.
Yeah, I can say from personal experience, when knowing these practices of yours and utilizing them in my life, I can tell a quick story where a few years back I was really struggling professionally, and Tawny was there helping me along the way. Was just getting my feet in the ground in real estate. And one of the things that I had is at 3 a.m. in the morning, I had this dream that I was late for work and I had to jump out of bed, and I literally started to walk out the door of my bedroom to go to work. And it was a thoughtfulness coming back to the present moment of checking back in with reality, where I had literally, my brain had just taken over and had just pushed me down this road. And it was I mean, obviously I wasn't going to go to work in my pajamas at 3 a.m., but that's an extreme story. But it is one of those ones that connects back to letting an aspect of a person's life take over the whole experience and how dramatically incorrect it was ultimately.
Yeah, that makes me think as you're talking about like just being on automatic pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's a headspace, automatic pilot. We just do and go through life in a way that, has maybe less depth, less meaning, less purpose is a word that gets thrown out there quite a bit. I'm hesitant to use the word purpose. There's a lot of pressure in purpose. That's for another talk.
I love that about you. Your word choice is always on point.
Yeah. So, we've heard a lot about sleep better, kind of figure
Sure.
out your sleep right now, get out in nature, figure out how to relax right now, eat healthy. We've got a lot of information going around that's helping us to sort of take care of ourselves, practice self-care in this time. But one of the things that I think is super important that maybe we're not hearing so much about is just that dealing with uncertainty and loss of control is hard for everybody. Like that's a tough thing because we
Yeah.
have operated from the perspective, and it's a myth, but we've operated from the perspective that we actually do have control of things that we don't actually have control of, and that certainty is possible. We've tricked ourselves.
So what I hear you saying is certainty is possible, is impossible, and we really don't have control over as many things as we think we do in life. And everybody, I like this discussion. I'm thinking in my own head about all, there we all have that need for control in our lives.
Mm.
And just a moment ago we were talking about the difference between being present and letting and being focused on those three areas. Well, we're now transitioning into how to utilize that in these situations of grief, or even, I mean, it's a mild case of loss when you may lose you're going through the process of grief essentially in some ways. Fair enough.
Absolutely. But the other thing is, depending on what our surroundings are and what environment we're in right now, we could be in an apartment with not a whole lot of light going on and not a whole lot of places to go. We could be in a a larger dwelling, that maybe we can get outside and maybe we have access to being able to, get out into nature. And so, and some of us aren't getting out even to go to work, and some of us are. So we've got different experiences that we're dealing with. And certainly some of them are going to be a little bit more challenging than others, for sure. So recognizing that, for example, somebody in an apartment with a larger family, wow, their experience is going to be very different than mine. For example, my kids are no longer living at home. I'm in a home. I can go outside and be in the sunshine, right? So,
and just as a word of advice, that just happened. She is just recently an empty nester. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I am ready. And so, yeah, a side note. So my experience is going to be obviously very different than another family's experience and another individual's experience. And so for that particular family, we're going to really want to sort of be aware that their loss of freedom, for example, is a reality to a greater extent than, for example, mine.
Yeah.
And their restlessness and the tension that surrounds them. And just, we're, like you said, nature is good for us. And if we're not able to get out into it as often as would be helpful, then that's really going to take a toll over time.
I'd like to hear your understanding or thoughts on the idea of guilt tied in with this, because I think that as people work through these challenges with their family, they're being over exaggerated because of the confined spaces and requirements. And so with that, a parent or loved one may feel guilt about not being able to honor the relationship the way they do, or their feelings are inside. So how could they move through that same conversation using your skills of being present and releasing that guilt? Is that
that's such a great question. I think that in addition to guilt, there's frustration and disconnection, and all of our coping mechanisms that we've had and had been using all throughout our life up until this moment are going to be like hugely glaring right now, because we can't escape. And so if our coping mechanism is to kind of, in general, sort of feel a little bit of guilt about things like that, not measuring up enough or not feeling worthy or those kinds of things, if we have that in place for us anyways, those are going to be more intense. And that's going to make it a lot more difficult to sort of like regulate, any of those emotions get to, I always think about it as a 1 to 10, right? If we're in an emotional state of 8 to 10, that's a pretty high state. It's the thinking part of the brain is kind of turned off at that point, and it's difficult to regulate through that, right?
Oh yeah.
So as we're seeing sort of these emotions and these ways of coping intensify, that is a real picture for a lot of people, and that's absolutely concerning, and we could talk a lot about that even in another talk. But until we get up to that level, when all of this started happening, I thought about I created an acronym called CALM. Right?
Yes, I was hoping you would bring this up. That's great. Let's talk about the CALM acronym.
Yes, and so the brain, certain words, depending, it's not just the words itself. Depending on the way that we use the words, it fires different things in the brain, right?
Yeah.
And calm I think when most of us feel calm, hear calm, we have a particular experience when we hear calm that is different than calm down, right? That's a different.
It's a tone thing, and it's the actual words.
Right. Yeah, we definitely have another experience with that. I just want to recognize that. Okay. Yeah. So I created this acronym of CALM, the C standing for create, the A standing for attune, the L for love, and the M for be mindful. And so if we really sort of dial this experience back into, okay, here we are, we're able to access some level of presence in our experience. We're not trying to avoid, deny, minimize, try to create certainty, try to figure out all the things, and stay in a headspace. We're able to access different parts of ourselves that are always available to ourselves. We just haven't necessarily practiced them enough or sort of checked in enough with ourselves around them, but they are there because it's a human capacity. Capacity, right? So with create, attune, love, and mindful, or be mindful, we've got some practices in there that we can start to generate for ourselves right away that are going to put us in a calm state as a human being and allow us to sort of manage through these places and spaces that we're in currently, no matter how confined we feel or not.
I love this already. And I think, so we've now, I think in our conversations, we've kind of talked through some of the varied steps. We've now come to a really great tool, the Calm acronym that people can actually utilize. So in it, would you break down each of the topics and maybe given it how they might incorporate into a person's life?
Yeah, absolutely. So that first, the first part, create, right, for calm, for the C in calm is, you know, we're all creative beings, one level or another. Some people are artistic. Some people are creative in ways that they can, you know, build or they can fix a problem, right? So we are all creative in a lot of different ways. I think the misnomer has been that creativity has to be as an art sort of experience.
If I may interject, I would say in create, I'm not a creative person, but doing this Talks with Josh was my creative outlet for the community. So yeah, I'm right there in support of you. Sorry.
No, that is such an excellent example. We all have that capacity, whether we decide we're a creative person or not. The human capacity has creativity in it. And when we create, we express ourselves in ways that are unique to us. I'm not creating something I'm not very good at, probably.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And when we create something that is unique and an expression of us, there's a sense of connection to ourselves, a sense of natural, say, motivation sometimes.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm sometimes.
Absolutely. Satisfaction.
Yeah, there's like a flow that happens when we are creating, even if it's on a small scale. So if a family is creating a recipe together, or creating a dinner together, or they're creating a dance together, or they're creating a writing together. I mean, you could even write different chapters of a book depending on
totally.
if you're a family that needs something to do.
Yeah.
But even on an individual level, like you said, you found and landed on this space that probably wasn't even on your radar before.
Yeah, I had an interest in doing video work, but I didn't know, I had no intention of creating a talk show. That's for sure. But it gave me the ability to help other people, other businesses, and the community at large. So yeah, enough of my soapbox there, but then.
No, it's such a great example because even if, you know, I know that it's important to do for others, absolutely important to do for others, but sometimes we get hinked up on that. Like, oh, there's a lot of pressure in doing for others. If we are creative with what we're interested, we're naturally going to be a better self.
Yeah.
We're naturally going to be open in a way that folks can connect with us. And so we don't even have to worry about this. Am I helping others necessarily?
Yeah. It takes you to the attune.
So the attune is really about, it's about connection. It's about noticing and building awareness around yourself. Like, okay, attuning to yourself. What's going on in my belly? Where am I at with heart space? That's at a level of attunement. And then also with the folks that we're in our spaces with. Really kind of almost like eyes wide open, sort of seeing where they're at.
And us, right? Yeah.
Both simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
Because if we can see them where they're at and we're open because we can see ourselves where we're at, there's just this open space of energy that ends up sort of traveling between us.
It does. And it flows more fluidly because when you're attuned with yourself and another person's perspective, one of the great things you taught me was there's no control over others. So when it comes to a person's experience or opinion, let them experience it and state their opinion. It doesn't mean that they're trying to change you or anything like that. You're just having a coexisting experience from different perspectives.
Absolutely. And wherever you're at is going to be one thing, and wherever they're at is going to be another thing. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be the same thing.
I love that. And the intuning part is also just a huge part of the check-in. I think whenever you're feeling tense inside, you're feeling anxious or restless, you can't get settled and flipping through the channels all crazy. Like, you can just take a moment for some mindfulness practice, which is really hard for a lot of people. So if you can't sit for like 20 minutes, even just pulling yourself aside for 5 minutes, cutting out the noise in your head, thinking clearly about nothing, or if something pops up, just being there in that space with it, but just attune, know where you're coming from.
Absolutely. And just one more thing about that, it offers you a piece of reality. Like you are where you are. You don't have to go anywhere else to get out of where you are.
That's awesome. Okay, L for love, which I mean, I'm just a big old hearted love bug over here. So tell us about some love.
Yeah. So love, I like to think about love as a verb, right? And sort of really spending time sort of getting to what your love doing is, right? And so that doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to be an extrovert in these times and go out there and do something that would be big or super helpful to somebody. Love can be offering and sharing any kind of resource you have with somebody who may not have as much of that resource. So that could be creativity, that could be a listening ear, that could be time, that could be financial, that could be sharing materialistic resources. But it's just this act of love that you're open and available and willing to kind of put that into action to help another person.
I think one of the things that sticks with me in that is the act of gratitude. And it's something where if you literally have nothing, if you just go out there and do a generous act for somebody, give a statement of some kind, you can, it is more powerful on you than potentially even the other person. But even if it's equal, it's just more about sharing that act of gratitude, bringing gratitude into your life in as many abundant ways as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with these, they will intertwine, right? Like, so attuning and loving sometimes can be sort of present at the same time. And so it sounds like that's what you're talking about too with gratitude, is that there's this sense of, grateful for, there definitely has to be some level of attunement to have gratitude for. Right. And so, just that act of love of that, there's other people on the planet. And no matter where you're at, there is absolutely something that you can offer another person.
Yes. And you never know what it is. Sometimes just oh, thank you, go right ahead. That can change a person's whole experience if they've just been shit on all day. Sorry for saying that, but if they have.
Absolutely. Yep. And so that takes us to the be mindful. So mindfulness, I kind of switched my thoughts about mindfulness a while back, and because I think it trips us up a little bit. I like to think of mindfulness as heartfulness.
Oh.
In a sense, because mindfulness, I think sometimes we like to think about mindfulness as kind of controlling our mind. And really it's about getting in touch with our senses. So we're feeling what we're feeling as far as like touch. We're hearing what we're hearing. We're tasting what we're tasting. We're smelling what we're smelling.
So it's more of a physical reaction, whereas attuning is the emotional connection. Being, and by this definition, being mindful is being actively aware. Yeah,
because that's our experience, right? So like we could be going on a hike and there could be lots of sounds, smells, feeling, senses of touch around us. But I've had tons of clients who just go on a hike to solve all the problems. They've missed everything about their senses.
Yeah, they've missed the songbirds and the turtles and the smells of the nature, like all, And there is a meditation practice, and you probably know the name, but it's where your meditation and movement is this kind of along that same idea, where if I was to grab my glass, it's just being aware of every muscle and finger that's wrapping around it to grab it, rather than being rattled up in the thoughts of it all.
Yes, and that really is mindful meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when we think about it, I just known lots of people that I've talked to sort of think about mindfulness as sort of controlling your thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's not that. It really is about being completely there and with all of your senses.
I adore
that is an
that.
experience. That's an experience that we're having.
Yeah, I love this clarification, and I hope that more people pick up on what Tawny's saying today, because really it is the release of pressure on yourself to have to solve every crisis in your head. You will find greater. Have you ever heard of the artist block for Tawny or anybody out there? Like, it's the same concept. An artist is painting the painting behind me, and they can't decide what color to apply next, and so they get the artist block. And you can never force yourself through those situations, or if you do, the outcome's never going to be what it's potentially could have been. Would you have just been mindful in it and took out some of the thinking?
Yes, the thinking stops the flow.
I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So utilizing the acronym of CALM will keep the flow moving.
Oh, I love it. Well, Tawny, with that said, we've reached our 30 minutes here, and I just wanted to really thank you for your time today. I think we've hit on some really key points. If you would like to spend any more time talking with Tawny in any capacity, she's an incredible resource. I've attached to this video is all of her direct contact information. So you're welcome to schedule. I mean, I know it's hard to schedule things now, but what's great is Tawny, before this was even happening, was doing televisits. So you can meet with her in this very same format over the internet from the comfort of your own home, and not just talk about the CALM methodology that she's utilizing, but she's got a whole basket of tools for many ranges of needs and services. And I would really implore that you just take a look in consideration.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun chatting with you, Josh.
Oh, it's always a pleasure and a joy.
Yes.
And thank you for being here, bringing this to the community. And as I always say, Talks with Josh is about bringing local experts direct from your neighborhoods and into your homes to give you helpful advice. And I hope all of you enjoyed our talk today. Tawny Sanabria, thank you so much for